People do all sorts of crazy things in the name of art. Some can and sell their own feces and call it artist shit, like Piero Manzoni did in 1961. Others have a friend shoot them in the arm with a rifle as a performance piece, like Chris did in 1971. And others find starving donkeys, chloroform them, and then cast their bodies in plaster to depict realistic suffering, as the famed Antoni Gaudí did while working on La Sagrada Família, Barcelona's most famous cathedral. Last year, I took a solo trip to Barcelona where I got to see this cathedral in person. It was already breathtaking from the rooftop of my Airbnb, which was a couple miles away, but even more awe-inspiring up close. The moment you step inside, his reverence for nature hits you before anything else does. The columns look like trees, branching upwards, tapering off and dividing naturally, like a forest frozen mid-growth. The stained glass washes everything in color, and it reminds you so distinctly of the way that light filters through a canopy of leaves. It was also very intentionally designed, so much so that sometimes it feels like it was grown rather than built. But the more I started to learn about Gaudí, the more I started to notice something deeper. His obsession with nature wasn't just aesthetic, it was spiritual, it was anatomical, and sometimes it was very disturbingly literal. He didn't just admire animals, he used them, and it got me thinking, how often do we do the same? This is part one of a 3-part series that explores the strange ways we use animals in the name of inspiration, innovation, progress, starting with what I'm calling bio-aestheticism, the art of borrowing from nature's beauty, how we turn animals into symbols, textures, shapes, metaphors, how we cast their bodies in stone, we carve their anatomy in cathedral walls. We love how something looks, but do we care whether it lives? Part 2 will cover biomimicry, which is copying nature and animals to build machines or to solve problems. And then part 3 will cover bioutilization, which is the most literal of all. Not just mimicking animals, but using them directly, giving them jobs, without payment, of course. But first, the artists, the architects, the worshippers, the ones who love nature, but harm it anyway. If you've ever been to Barcelona or even just Googled it, you've definitely seen Gaudí. He's not just part of the city, he is the city. His buildings are on the tour buses, the postcards, the fridge magnets, whatever you could possibly think of, all of the little tourist traps. Visiting his cathedral, La Sagrada Família, I'm definitely going to butcher all of these names in this video, don't come for me. I took French, not Spanish in high school. Or his other architectural projects like Casa Batlló or Casa Mila or Parc Güell is a tourist requirement, just like eating paella or pretending to understand Picasso. And for very good reason. I mean, the architecture is stunning. I had never seen anything like it before, and the world hadn't either until he came along. When I first saw La Sagrada Família, I thought it was ancient. It certainly looks that way, but it's actually still under construction. It's still being built. It's the longest running architectural project in the world. Started way back in 1882 and still remains unfinished a century and a half later. Gaudí worked on this project obsessively for the last 15 years of his life, rarely leaving the site. But when he died in 1926, only a small portion had been completed. Then came the Spanish Civil War, where anarchists stormed his workshop and set fire to his plans. It wasn't personal, but his work did get caught in the crosshairs. And so ever since, architects have been trying to reverse engineer his vision and his designs by piecing together clues and theories and half-burned fragments. They finished the interior in 2010, which is why I was able to see it, but the full structure is still a work in progress. Just to illustrate how much Gaudí believed that he respected and revered nature, he once said that nothing humans create should outshine nature, so he deliberately designed the tallest tower of La Sagrada Família to be 1 meter shorter than the nearby Montjuïc hill. This architectural project was like his form of worship, and every little corner of it reflects that. The columns shaped like tree trunks, the ceiling based on hyperboloids, the carefully crafted insects on the door, the entire back of the church sculpted to look like tensed muscle and bone. It's a cathedral built on reverence, but reverence does not always mean respect. I said before that Gaudí was inspired by nature, but it was more than that. He was possessed by it. He believed that every answer an architect could possibly need already existed in the natural world. They just had to watch closely enough. He said everything comes from the great book of nature, and he meant it. He studied the curves of snails, the branching of trees, the rib cage of animals, the spirals of a sunflower, mimicking wing bones and spirals in the staircases and ventilation systems of Casa Batlló. He studied the spinal columns of animals to design curved beams and arches, In Park Güell, he worked with the terrain, not against it, weaving footpaths and viaducts around the natural contours of the hill like he was in a conversation with the land itself. Sadly, I did not get to visit Park Güell myself. I really wanted to, but the tickets had sold out weeks in advance. Yeah, if you're ever planning on visiting Barcelona, book all of the touristy things that you want to do well in advance. I did for most of the things. I just missed Park Güell, and sadly I live to tell the tale now and complain on YouTube. But it was the best trip ever. I actually vlogged the whole thing a week as a vegan in Barcelona, and it became my favorite city. Like, long-term goal now is to live there. So yeah, let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that. But anyways, back to the video. Gaudí also once said, "The straight line belongs to man, the curve belongs to God." And if you look at any of his buildings, from the undulating balconies to the honeycomb mosaics to the bone white archways, it kind of starts to feel less like architecture and more like assembling a bunch of fossils from tiny to gargantuan, like reconstructing skeletons. When I was running my hands against the smooth walls of Casa Batillo, I felt like I was inside of a huge animal rather than inside of a building. It felt alive. It felt like it would start breathing at any second. He refused to marry or even pursue romance, thinking that human desire would distract from the divine communion that he felt with nature. But his reverence wasn't harmless. There's a thin line between devotion and control, or inspiration and ownership, and Gaudí crossed that often. He tried to capture living bodies in their exact form, even if it meant destroying them in the process. When he needed a donkey for the biblical structure on the facade of La Sagrada Família, he didn't just sketch one up or draw one from memory or sculpt it. He found a starving donkey, one thin enough to look like it had been wandering the desert without food for 40 days, chloroformed it, and then cast it in plaster. That structure still stands today. I saw it with my own two eyes, with millions of people admiring it, few knowing what it cost or caring at all. He even tried to do the same thing with people. He sedated live human models and then covered them in plaster to try to capture the exact musculature of suffering. One nearly died, and only then did he stop. Not because it was ethically wrong, but because it was practically dangerous. And yet, for all of his disturbing methods, he's regarded universally as a genius, a holy figure in architecture, and his reverence for nature is praised, but can we really call it that? Maybe we can. I mean, you can worship something and still violate it. The same way men do to women's bodies every single day. All right, but we're not getting into that. You can love the form and ignore the living being behind it. And when it comes to animals, we do that all the time. People who would quite literally die or kill for their pet dog or their cat, or veterinarians who dedicate their entire careers to saving animal lives. People who themselves would say this is love and respect, but then casually pay for the killing of millions of animals come dinner. Not because they have to, but because they've never really had to look. It's easy to love something in theory and then harm it in practice. Gaudí did it himself, costing real bodies in the process. He was laid to rest in the crypt beneath La Sagrada Família, in the bones of his own creation. Of course, Gaudí was far from the last artist to blur the line between harm and reverence. A century later, across the world and in a very different artistic context, Damien Hirst would take that same logic to an extreme degree.
I'm Damien Hirst, and I'm a Gemini, and I'm in Qatar for my exhibition, Relics.
When I was in college in Qatar, his name came up all the time. He's a British artist, and he was having his first massive exhibition, first solo show in the Middle East. It was called Relics, and it was held in a museum in Doha.
The former bad boy of British art, Damien Hirst built his reputation on controversy and was commissioned by the head of Qatar's Museums Authority, Sheikh Mayasser.
I remember not knowing what to expect, but expecting something incredible after hearing him be touted as the most successful and the richest contemporary artist to ever live. And then when I walked into the museum and I saw corpses upon corpses suspended in glass jars and formaldehyde, just being completely taken aback.
This is my biggest show ever. Yeah, Al Iraq. Yeah, it's huge. And they built this space inside to fit the works, which was great. Normally you just have to make the works fit the space.
It was jarring and off-putting, to say the least. And I wasn't even vegetarian then. That came the next year. You've probably seen his work even if you didn't recognize that it was his. A giant tiger shark suspended in a tank of formaldehyde, jaws parted mid-lunge, a cow and her calf sliced in half and displayed in glass cases, their insides exposed like museum specimens. These aren't obscure pieces either. They've toured the world, they've sold for millions, and defined a whole era of contemporary art. The titles are just as dramatic: The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living, Mother and Child, parentheses, divided, God Alone Knows. Critics call them visceral, existential, a confrontation with mortality. They're hard to look away from, but they're also super fucking hard to look at. But somehow, Damien Hirst doesn't actually see them as morbid at all. He has repeatedly said that his work is about honoring life, confronting death in order to understand it.
Well, I just want art to, look good and influence people.
He describes himself as having a Victorian obsession with nature, saying, "I've always been interested in the idea of beauty in the natural world and how it can stop you in your tracks. I think I'm trying to say something truthful about the beauty and horror of life." But here's what most people don't realize. These animals weren't found. They were captured and killed specifically for these pieces. The shark, for example, the one in The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living, was a real wild tiger shark caught by an Australian fisherman named Vic Hislop specifically for Hirst. And when the original specimen began to rot, Hirst didn't switch to a replica, he commissioned another one. In his own words, "It's got to be real. The shark's got to be real, otherwise it just doesn't work." Hirst's entire career is built on killing, not metaphorical, but real, physical, literal dead bodies, arranged into sculptures. Sheep floating in formaldehyde, a severed cow's head left in a sealed box with live maggots and flies, allowed to rot as a part of a gallery installation. Thousands of butterflies bred and glued to canvases. In one exhibit, he released live butterflies into a gallery where visitors brushed against them, stepped on them, accidentally killed them, all in the name of interactive art. Over 9,000 died, and while butterflies might seem like they're too simple to suffer, research is increasingly suggesting that insects can learn, can remember, and can even feel pain. The gallery described it as a unique sensory experience.
With the butterflies flying around and happy.
Yeah. But the RSPCA doubts they were happy. It says Damien Hirst forced them to live in an artificial environment and he should have treated them with more kindness. 9,000 butterflies did die during the show's 5-month run. It's been said some varieties died after a few days, which might have lived for months in the wild. And the PETA Foundation says they all suffered.
People defend his work by talking about the meaning behind it. It's about fragility, it's about transience, it's about the tension between permanence and decay. But meaning doesn't cancel harm. In fact, sometimes it only serves to justify it, cover it up, make it look profound or earned. Damien Hirst is just a small, tiny part of a larger conversation that has to be had about how we treat animals in the name of beauty and innovation. We name our tech after them: Featherlight, Shark Skin, Mule Pack. We love how they move. We love how they look. We learn and take from them. But bio-aestheticism is often just a polite way of extraction, like saying thank you without even asking if you can take. What does it mean to honor the lives behind the designs? In this video, we looked at how artists like Gaudí and Hirst drew from nature and the lines that get crossed in the name of beauty, but it doesn't stop at art. What happens when we turn that same gaze towards science and how we're building the future? That's what we're gonna look at in part 2. We'll look at how science and engineering have borrowed from the bodies of animals like cow stomachs. I'll see you there, hopefully. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you found it eye-opening or if you'd like to support in any way, a link to my Patreon is in the description below. You can join my book club if that's your thing. But if not, a like, comment, or subscription goes a super long way. See you next time. Damien Hirst doesn't even see